Hey everyone, it's Peter Kerr from Rock Daydream Nation, and today I've got two esteemed guests to the channel, and we are going to talk about Whitesnake. More specifically, we're going to talk about Whitesnake from 1987 to the final album, Flesh and Blood. The premise of the show is best song, worst song, each album. Mr. Tim Derling, welcome back to the channel, my friend. Good to see you.
Always a pleasure, Peter. Thank you for inviting me onto this. Your timing is really good.
And Reed Little from the Contrarians, always good to see you, my friend.
Thanks as always for the invitation. Looking forward to this one. It's almost like our marathon 1987 review. Everyone should go watch that, even though it's
absolutely.
What is that, 2 hours? But this is going to be good.
Yep, look, we're going to be talking all things Whitesnake. So we're not just going to be talking best song, worst song. We're going to be putting stories in. We'll start off with the 1987 album, Tim. And this was an absolutely blockbuster album. Look, hand on heart, I reckon this has gone diamond certification by now. It's sold multiple copies all around the world. This was the breakthrough album, really, for DC. I'll throw it over to you, Tim. What is your favorite song, least favorite, best, worst? Over to you.
My least favorite song on the 87 album was a relatively easy one. I knew right away. Favorite's a tough one. It's down to two, and gun to my head, I gotta go Still of the Night. I mean, it's just a bruiser of a metal anthem. I mean, it's the first song I ever heard by Whitesnake. I saw the video. I was 12. I'd never heard of Whitesnake before. Crying in the Rain was very, very, very close, because that's just explosive on this album. The late great John Sykes, man, we missed that guy. But I got to go with Still of the Night. So I'm gonna stick with one, and it's Still of the Night. My least favorite, I think it's always been Straight for the Heart. It's too poppy. It's too happy. It just doesn't suit. It just does not suit David's voice. It doesn't suit the sound of the band. I think it sticks out like a sore thumb on this album. I mean, yes, Here I Go Again is poppy in a way. It's got lots of the keyboards, and Is This Love was a huge hit. And even Don't Turn Away has lots of keyboards, but Straight for the Heart just has that. It's almost like the Whitesnake version of power pop, and I've just never been a big fan of the song. So those are my choices there.
A quick question to you, Tim. Do you think that John Sykes would have, if the recording band did continue into a live environment, do you think it would have worked with John?
Absolutely. John was charismatic. He liked to share the spotlight, if not hog the spotlight. So yeah, I don't see there being any. I can see him hamming it up in the videos just as much as Vivian and Adrian did. With the now. It probably would have had to have the problem is you'd probably want a second guitarist, but that probably wouldn't have worked. But if that band had stayed together, they would have had to hire a keyboard player. But if you listen to the live album, that's with, I think we talked about this on the marathon show we did on the 87, like Reed said. When you listen to that band, the video band, we'll call them, do the songs from 1987, they don't sound right, because it's not the band that recorded them. So I think that, it's a shame. And also I have other thoughts about what a loss it was that John Sykes and Coverdale couldn't continue together. But yeah, I think it absolutely would have worked. I mean, John Sykes was a star waiting to happen.
So there would have been an argument point down the track, because I know David was very focused on two guitarists. So I think that would have been a big hurdle.
He always had two guitarists, right? I mean, except for the Slide It In tour, and you miss it. You miss having those songs are built for two guitars. So somewhere along the line, it would have had to say, John, you're going to have to. We might get you to do 80% of the leads, but we're going to have a second guitar player keeping the rhythm going.
Yeah, look, so many what if questions. It's a rabbit hole that we could just keep talking about. Appreciate that. Great start. Reed, favorite song, least favorite song?
Okay, so for me, it was the opposite. When I first, my favorite song I knew right away. My least favorite, there's a lot of competition. When this album first came out, I would only listen to the first 3 songs. That was, in my hardcore metal days, and the first 3 songs are killer, and the rest of the album, I was like, eh. And over the years, I've somewhat warmed to it, but honestly, I still think it's 3 fantastic songs, and the rest of it's just an okay album. Has some great playing on it, has some great singing on it. I don't think the material's particularly great. So, Still of the Night is my favorite song. I'm going to be shocked if Peter picks a different song when we get to him. But let's face it, it just has one of the best riffs of the 80s. It's so good. It's so memorable. The only thing that lets that song down is the production on it. It's so drenched in harmonizer. It's so drenched in reverb. It's too much. But you can now get, because we live in the age of continual remixes and remakes, you can get the remix version of it on the Rock album.
Yes.
And that has less reverb on it. I think it's a superior mix, but some people, they only like the first thing they hear, and that becomes the correct thing, and they never want to hear the new thing, which I get too. But still, yeah, fantastic song. I wish Coverdale would at least admit that he's completely ripping off Led Zeppelin in the middle part of the song, which he still doesn't do, says that he was not influenced by Led Zeppelin doing that song. Sure, Dave. We'll be talking more about Led Zeppelin shortly. And my least favorite song is actually Don't Turn Away. I think is the one that I kind of settled on. It's fine. It's fine. But it's no better than that. Trite is the adjective that comes to mind. It's nothing particularly special. The lyrics not particularly good. There are a lot, I didn't count them this time because I know how much that irritated people last time, but there are a lot of John Sykes wind-ups in that song that are writing checks that the rest of the song just can't cash. So it is my least favorite track on the album. I did see the tour with Adrian and Vivian. It was a fantastic tour. Great show. And I honestly think about Sykes as a 2-guitar guy. He was in Thin Lizzy,
Yeah, that's true.
He didn't get to kick Scott Gorham off stage. And Adrian Vandenberg was remarkably willing to just step aside and let other players take the spotlight. So I honestly think that Coverdale could still have recruited Vandenberg and done a 2-guitar lineup with Sykes.
Yeah, but the rumor is that he did take umbrage because that was, being discussed at the time, and Sykes wanted to be the sole guitar player in the band. But whether that's true or not, but there was rumors around that. But all right, wonderful. Thanks, Reed. Surprise, surprise. Still of the Night is my favorite. I think it's one of the greatest riffs of the 80s, if not rock and roll. I love it. I just think it's a game changer. There's so much texture, atmosphere, the arrangements. When that came out, it was like an earthquake. It was just so head and shoulders above what was happening in metal at that particular time. There's so much drama. I love the playing of Sykes. I'll say it. I think it's the best Sykes guitar committed to tape. He's just putting all the tricks. The pyrotechnics are just wonderful. I think DC is in fine vocal voice, even though it's a different vocal post the operation, the sinus operation. And when you know the stories and the struggles that DC went through to make this album, it's kind of a real underdog story. And I think a lot of the fans that were behind Whitesnake in the early era, even though it was a massive change in sound, were quite, pleased that he had finally made it with this song. It rips off Led Zeppelin, so what? Everyone rips off everybody, but it's the way you do it. And I think there was a famous, Jimmy Page was watching the video and he fell off the floor, fell onto the floor laughing when he saw Vandenberg with the, is it Vandenberg in the film clip?
Yeah. And he said it wasn't at the playing.
Yeah.
It was the visual that made him laugh.
Yeah. But everything was just done right in this project, Tim. The tawny containers, the muse in the videos, the look, the sound. It was just 1987. And maybe we'll talk about that as we go deep into the career. Maybe that was the killer of Whitesnake's career, because it captured a sound that was it was the moment, but did it have longevity down the track? And Reed's alluding to that with the sonics and the gated drums. But I think when you strip it down, Still of the Night is a wonderful song. Take away the embellishments, it's still a great song, and that's my favorite. My least favorite, sorry, Tim, I didn't mean to copy you, is Straight for the Heart. It is a little bit poppy. He's putting his toes out in the top 40. Yeah. Look, there is a little bit of filler on this album, but over time I've warmed to the filler, but this one I kind of least gravitate to. So Straight for the Heart is probably the song that I like the least. Alrighty, so 1987. We go on to the follow-up, Slip of the Tongue, in 1989. It only shifted, I think, 1 to 2 mil. Different lineup completely. And Steve Vai, Adrian Vandenberg, who didn't play on the album, Rudy Sarzo, Tommy Aldridge, and David Coverdale. Mr. Derling, what's your favourite and least favourite songs on this album?
Well, yeah, they definitely, they overshipped, right? Geffen Records, because I found in 1998, I found a completely sealed copy of it, the hype sticker. I actually really like this album. This was the first Whitesnake album that I was queued up to buy, actively looking for. And I'm just used to hearing this album the way that it is. And I'm a big Steve Vai fan. And no, he didn't exactly fit Whitesnake, but it was fun. It was fun to hear him. My favorite song on this album, though, I'm going to go off the beaten path, probably from what most people would say. I really like Wings of the Storm. I think that's a heavy, it's got a nice melody from Steve. I think Coverdale's vocals are more measured on it. David did a lot of screaming on this album, and that led into the tour from this album. I can't even watch that live at Donington because Coverdale screams everything. It's no wonder he damaged his voice. But Wings of the Storm, he sings really nicely during the voice. It never gets too crazy to me, and it's never any of that screaming at the absolute high end of his range. I just really like Wings of the Storm. I think it's a really cool song. My least favorite song is Kitten's Got Claws. To me, that's a little bit too on the nose. A dedication to his then wife. Look, obviously, yeah, those videos made an impression. Like I said, I was 12 years old. So, but it just seems a little bit on the nose for him to do a song, and everybody knew it was about her. There was no big secret there. And I just don't think it's that great a song. So that's my least favorite. So Wings of the Storm is my favorite, and Kitten's Got Claws is my least favorite on Slip of the Tongue.
Yeah, good stuff, Tim. Reed.
Okay, so Steve Vai's an interesting and I know divisive figure. And I had an epiphany with Steve Vai last year when he came through town on the Beat Tour, playing King Crimson music with Adrian Belew and the guys who were in the 1980s version of King Crimson. With Tony Carey Tony Carey on bass. Levin on bass, but Carey on drums from Tool.
Oh, Danny Carey.
Danny Carey. That's
Tony Carey was Rainbow.
Yeah, I knew I had the name wrong. I just couldn't remember which name it was. Sorry, people, I'm old. But watching Steve play that music was just jaw-dropping, because he would do those weird polyrhythms, and he just shifts effortlessly into the most fluid lead you can imagine. Truly a master of his craft. And I was like, wait, I have undersold Steve Vai my whole life, because I don't particularly like Steve Vai's solo catalog. I have about 5 of his albums. I never listened to any of them. But now I'm like, dang, that guy is really good, especially as a sideman. And I know what really bothers the purists is that there's no blues on Slip of the Tongue. Steve did not write the songs. Adrian Vandenberg wrote the songs, but Steve completely takes the blues out of the music. And I know, again, that bothers people that are looking for that that older Whitesnake sound, the 1970s, early 80s Whitesnake. But again, it wasn't the late 70s, early 80s anymore. No one in America was buying the blues until Guns N' Roses made it kind of semi-popular, bluesy. But I adore this album. I think it's better than the 1987 album. I'm just going to say it.
Same here.
I like those first 3 tracks on 1987, and the rest of it is eh. Whereas this one, I like the whole album. But my favorite track, I'm actually going to go with Judgment Day. And I like it for multiple reasons. And here we are again. I said I was going to talk about Led Zeppelin. Here we are doing a Led Zeppelin pastiche on an album, and they're not even trying to hide it this time. This track is just so Zeppelin-y. But weirdly, I think that makes it one of the most authentic collaborations between Vai and Whitesnake, because Vai is an enormous Led Zeppelin fan. If you listen to Vai talk about why he became a guitarist, he says he started taking guitar lessons with Joe Satriani because he wanted to learn how to play Heartbreaker. All he ever wanted to do was be Jimmy Page. Now, he went in a completely different direction, but he loves Zeppelin, and he brings that to this song. And I think that really makes that track for me. And it's so different from the rest of the album. So I like the fact that it stands out. Plus, it's just a really heavy track. So lots of good stuff there. For my least favorite, I actually go with Sailing Ships, which is not a song that I dislike too much, but it does a couple of things that I don't like. It's a song of parts. The first part of the song is acoustic E. I love David's vocal, but I hate the acoustic sound. I don't think it's a real acoustic guitar. I think it's a piezo acoustic, probably playing directly into the board. I think it just sounds artificial and bad. And then you get to the back half of the song, and it's this giant power ballad. It's like something off of Meatloaf's Bad Out of Hell. And now I don't like David's vocal, but I love the power ballad guitar sound. So they just never hit that sweet spot where that song is right for me. And I don't hate it, but it's my least favorite.
Yeah, funny you were saying about the acoustic bit. It kind of has a bit of a spongy sound. I've often felt the same thing, but haven't articulated like you.
It reminded me of the song "Damn Good" from David Lee Roth's Skyscraper. It's almost a sitar sound.
Yes.
And that was only a year previous. That's what I hear. I don't hear an acoustic guitar so much as I hear like a Ravi Shankar kind of feel to it. Because that's one of the most, if you strip that down, and if you've ever heard the Starters in Tokyo, where it's just David and Adrian, that's a very traditional, like that's, I think they bundle that up with, I could be wrong, but well, no, maybe they don't. I think they should. I think it would go right into Soldier of Fortune. I think those two songs would sound really good together. But that's what I hear. It reminds me of the David Lee Roth, but Steve Vai, you know.
I do distinctly remember reading an interview with David Coverdale, and said Steve Vai is a great guitarist, but he just couldn't write riffs. So the connection I've got with that interview is, was he pitched, hey, can you bring some songs to the table? You're part of the project. We've paid you $1 to $2 million to join the band. Can you contribute some songs? So that's why I was thinking, with the uncredited, did he do any songwriting?
Steve is much more of an arranger in terms of the albums that he plays on as a sideman. So I don't think he's, well, I mean, he wrote with David Lee Roth.
Yeah.
But mostly he would be much more of an interpreter and an arranger than an original idea guy for a band like Whitesnake.
It was just interesting, like an interview 20 years later, and he's saying that, sort of Steve Vai probably wasn't the right fit, and he just can't write riffs. But he's a fabulous guitar player. I just find it quite an unusual take, postscript.
Yeah.
But album, I've always said that I'm not a big fan of it, but I have warmed to it over time. I think production, this is a very clinical sounding album, and I'd prefer if they did in the day bring out something that was a little bit organic, a little bit more raw. I love Judgment Day for the same reasons as Reed has articulated, because it's just It's Zeppelin. It's got those, as Martin Popoff would say, the Egypto chords, and it revels in it. And it's just a lot of fun. And DC's vocals kind of seem relaxed and loose, and he's just having a ball. My least favorite song is Kitten's Got Claws, because I think DC is trying to do something that a David Lee Roth would do, but do better. Something like a Yankee Rose. I think Roth has got that right touch of being irreverent, humorous, doing all these sexual puns and getting away with it. And DC's trying to do the same thing, but it falls flat. And, you know, you look at the lyrics and you go, okay, just talking about the missus. You know, we don't even know what the domestic bliss situation was like at that particular time. You probably thought, hey, I'll write a song for you, you know, just, okay. Anyway, it's so far away from Ready and Willing and Come and Get It, isn't it, Tim?
Yeah, oh yeah. It doesn't, you know, it's like that. When you said that, it reminds me of, I think, Bon Scott. He said that he was married for a time, and his wife said, "Why don't you write a song about me?" And he wrote, "She's Got Balls." And subsequently, she divorced him. I don't know if that's true, but it's kind of like, that's not what I meant when I said write a song about me.
Yeah.
You know, all the boys call your name down the wishing well. You're talking about your wife that way. Like, it's just, yeah, you're right. Dave has the humor. Not that Coverdale doesn't, but it's just different. And Dave's got more of that gentlemanly, very British humor, whereas Kitten's Got Claws is very glam, Sunset Strip, and it falls flat, I think.
I think DC as a showman, as a front person, has developed that side of it as time has gone on, because we all admit that his vocal ability has diminished. So he's got to use other tools to be able to engage with the audience. And he's turned into a very David Lee Roth, you know, the cheeky repartee between himself and the audience. So I think he has picked up the American showman technique over time in a live setting. But in this track, I think he is doing a David Lee Roth, but it just falls plain flat. So anyway, but look, in summary, I have warmed to the album a hell of a lot, but it's still not up there in the Whitesnake catalogue for me. Alrighty, so we go to an interesting album, Restless Heart. So I don't even think this got a release in America. So it got released in the UK as David Coverdale and Whitesnake. And there's Whitesnake, that's the Japan cover. Yeah. And the UK version, which I'll put up on the screen, shows David Coverdale, his face. And actually, Tim, bit of trivia, I think that's the last time you see DC on an album cover, because post that it's all symbols and scripts and tombstones, which is just bugs me no end.
Yeah.
You know, put the band. I know you guys are a little bit older, but don't be afraid. Come on. Rant over.
Yeah. I've said the same thing. You know, Martin and I talked about this on an episode of The Contrarians. I said it's hard to tell them apart. All the live albums and all the compilations, and I'll be out at a record store somewhere and I'll pick something. Oh, do I have this? Because they all look the same. They've all got some variant of this. And like this, to me, that's the best. That's the Hugh Syme cover, like the last two were. That's the best cover for Restless Heart. But no, I ended up getting a Japanese import CD back in the day, because until this reissue came out, it was never released in North America.
By this time in 1997, David was very jaded with the music business, and he actually did a farewell tour in the UK. Well, that didn't last long, but off the back of this album. And, you know, you look at the album cover, which I'm putting up, and David has got the brown hair. It's going back to a retro look, and, you know, it's all very somber. And I think this album's quite interesting because it's got its shoe in two camps. It's got the somber, middle of the road sort of balladry, and a direction that kind of harks back to the David Coverdale solo albums. And I think this was originally pitched to the record company as a solo album, but the record company strong-armed him, put the Whitesnake, it'll sell more units. And then you've got other songs on this album which are kind of more of the hard rock. So, Tim, this album, favourite and least favourite?
So yeah, I remember reading an interview with Coverdale when Into the Light came out in 2000, classic rock magazine, when I started to discover that. Great magazine. And he said that his contract with EMI said David Coverdale as the artist Whitesnake. So yeah, he said, well, I suppose I could toughen this up. That's why there's so many ballads on this album. It was never meant to be a Whitesnake band album. I mean, I remember putting the CD in. The first thing I hear was "Don't Turn Away." I'm like, that's a strange way to start a Whitesnake album. But I grew to like the album quite a bit, and it was like this hidden thing because it was every bit as bombastic and big sounding as the '87 and the Slip of the Tongue, but it's like it was invisible over here. I'm really surprised that he sold that many albums for Geffen and they wouldn't put it out. I mean, you know, it probably wouldn't have sold by this time, but it's like Whitesnake got forgotten over here until
Cowardice.
he.
I
Yeah,
reckon it's cowardice by the record company.
yeah. But yeah, I do like quite a bit of it. But I'm going to go with a rather obvious choice for favorite because it was a single. Too Many Tears. I think this is a great song. The ironic thing about it is that this is the only album that Adrian Vandenberg plays all the guitar on it. I mean, after all that time, but I think this is a fantastic mid-tempo ballad, and Coverdale is using the lower range of his voice again, like he did in the early years. And I just think this song is just so it's not a bombastic power ballad, but it's just nice. And I remember thinking before I knew that it was a single in a video, because I had no idea. I just ordered the CD as an import because I heard Whitesnake had a new album out. Then I discovered years later there was a video and it was a single. I'm like, well, no wonder. My least favorite song on the album is Can't Stop Now because it's a bit too Kenny Loggins Footloose for me. Again, it's a little bit like Straight for the Heart. It's a little too happy. But yeah, that's my favorite and least favorite from Restless Heart.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Do you think the track listing could have? It's kind of. Would you rearrange the track listing? Because I agree. When I first heard the CD, Tim, I was taken aback by "Don't Fade Away" being track one. I thought,
Yeah,
oh,
this Rhino reissue completely rearranges it. It starts off with the title song that makes a little bit more sense.
yes,
And yeah, I mean, these Restless Heart, You're So Fine, Can't Go On, Crying. I mean, that it's there's a lot of great rockers on here. Woman Trouble Blues and Take Me Back Again. Like it's good stuff. I mean, there's probably a lot of people that liked, you know, Slide It In, 1987, Slip the Tongue. They'd like this one too. There's nothing out of the ordinary about it. And there's really good songs on it. There's hooky songs. So anyway, I would highly
yeah,
recommend Restless Heart if you haven't heard it.
absolutely. And I think if Geffen just had some stones and just kept him on the roster, I think this would have sold. Probably wouldn't have been a blockbuster, but would have sold a lot more copies than people would
Yeah.
have expected. Reed, favorite song, least favorite.
Sure. So this album kind of came as a surprise to me. And again, in this age of remakes, I want to specify I have the original version on CD. I remember for those who grew up in the internet age, you don't appreciate how difficult it used to be to get import anything.
Yeah.
But now it's super easy. And this was one of the first like not available in the US things I bought. I also, Loudness and some Japanese stuff. But it was mellow, but I loved it from day one. I was like, wow, this is great. It's a step back. I would say it's not as hard rocking as Slip of the Tongue or 1987, not by a long shot. It still has some rockers on it, but it's much more 1980 or 1979, 1978 heaviness versus like 1987 heaviness. But it's very melodic. Dave hasn't completely lost his voice yet. The songwriting is good, and I love Adrian Vandenberg's playing. And I agree with David on this. It is much more of a David Coverdale solo album. They should have let him put it out as a solo album. I don't think putting Whitesnake on it sold any extra copies because it wasn't released in North America. So, but that said, my favorite track is the title track. I love the original. I haven't heard the reissue. I have no idea if the songs are that much different, but I love the whispered part where he starts off singing, then he wasted all my precious time.
Yeah.
it's a cool little thing, right? It's got some great guitar in it. Adrian plays fantastically on the whole song. And it's not fast, but it's upbeat and happy and hooky, and it's just a great song. Now, my least favorite is what to me is a completely inexplicable cover song, the one cover song on the album. And I listen to it and go, why the hell did they put this song on this album? It's terrible. And that's Stay With Me. And it's not just that I think flat out, I think the material is not as good as the material he was writing with Adrian. So I'm like, if you're going to put a cover song on, why pick a song that's not as good as the stuff you're writing? And then he sings it in, I can only describe it as a Janis Joplin impersonation. When he's screaming that "Stay With Me," I'm like, oh my God, this sucks. And it's the legitimately, this is a terrible song. I skip every time I play the album. I don't know why it's on the album. And it is my least favorite. David's a terrible Janis Joplin.
Right. Thank you. And a quick shout out, Tim, you're going to be seeing Adrian Vandenberg very soon.
As the time of filming this, tomorrow night, and I am very, very excited. I'm a huge fan of Adrian's guitar playing. I'm a huge fan of Vandenberg, the band. So he's going to be doing a lot of Whitesnake, and I did a fantasy set list a few weeks ago on my channel. But yeah, I mean, I've never seen Adrian before, so I'm really looking forward to this.
Fantastic. And I have to concur. His playing on this album is divine. It's bluesy. And DC actually was very prescriptive to Adrian, said, "We're shredding, take away the embellishments. I want this a feel album, a blues album." And boy, does Adrian repay in spades. It's the slower songs, the balladry. He really just has that feel and that groove. Adrian's playing on this album is absolutely divine. My favorite song on this album is Woman Trouble Blues, because it feels like a continuation from Coverdale Page. It starts off, to me, it's like To the Day I Die, Part 2. It's got that acoustic start, you know, the last track from Come and Get It. And then he goes into this high octane vocal line, which is with this deep Zeppelin riff, and you've got the harmonica, and you've got this little bit of push and pull with the bottom end, the guitar and the vocals. You know, the playing on this album is just fantastic, and I just think this is a really, really great closing track. My least favorite is Your Precious Love. I mean, DC's in fine voice, but this song, as a song, doesn't quite have the hooks as the rest. It's a bit of a mood piece. It's nicely arranged, and you've got the backup singers. But to me, there's just something a little bit missing. It doesn't have that edge, but Your Precious Love. But look, folks, this is a really, really strong album, and I can't say enough that you've got to do yourself a favor and discover it. Do we all agree that the remixed, reconstituted version does lift it from the 1997, or we prefer the original? Tim, Reed?
I like the original Japanese cover better, but I like the track listing on the reissue better. I think it makes more sense.
The Sonics, because they've added more keyboards.
You know what? I haven't actually listened to it. I'll be quite honest. Okay. I think it's a good sounding album in its own right. And you're right. Yeah. The musicians are great. It's Denny Carmassi on drums, and it's a Guy Pratt yes, on bass, Brett Tuggle on keyboards, or am I getting? But yeah, great lineup in that band. So
yeah.
Yeah. I haven't heard it. I've only heard the original. I think it sounded great. So when they said they were reissuing it, I went, I'm not paying for a reissue. I love this album. It's good as is.
We'll go to the next studio album, which was Good to Be Bad. So this is a new lineup. Whitesnake have probably toured the live circuit for a number of years. The figurehead, the songwriting figurehead of this band is Doug Aldridge. You've got Reb Beach. And in this lineup, you've got Uriah Duffy on bass and Chris Frazier on drums. So Good to Be Bad was a bit of a revival commercially. Went top 10 in the UK. He was starting to sell out, well, not starting, but he was selling out theatres and medium-sized venues in the UK, being a draw card in Europe. They did a tour of Australia. I saw that. They did a support run of Judas Priest in the US. Tim, what do you think of this album and your favourite and least favourite songs?
I was really excited. I saw this when I bought the CD. I found it in my local Walmart. I couldn't believe it. I knew Whitesnake had a new album out, but like Reed said, I figured I'd have to be getting an import version, or I'm gonna have to get this off Amazon. I'm not gonna find this locally, and there it was. I listened to this album a couple times leading up to doing this filming because, and it's better than I remembered it. I'm gonna get more into my little gripes with modern day Whitesnake on the next album. But as far as good to be bad, I remember thinking, and maybe it's because Coverdale sounds relatively good on this album. I saw Whitesnake in 2018 with Foreigner and with Jason Bonham. And yeah, Coverdale was pretty rough shape vocally for the most part. But like you said, Peter, he's got the mic stand. He's David Coverdale, a rock star, and it was cool. But his voice was the worst for wear. So on this album, he still sounds pretty decent. It's a really well produced album. My favorite on the album has got to be the opener, Best Years, though. I think that's just a tour de force. I mean, it's a great drum song, and it's a little bit different rhythm wise for Whitesnake. But yeah, it's one of my favorites. For my least favorite, I'm going to go with Summer Rain. I think there's some good ballads on this album, like All I Want, All I Need. I think that's a nice song, and like a little bit like Too Many Tears. But Summer Rain just doesn't go anywhere, and that leads into a problem that's more prevalent, I think, on the next album, where it sounds good, but I can't remember how these songs go after I hear them. That's just my opinion. So
appreciate that. Thanks, Tim. Reed.
Okay, so this is an album I got in real time as it came out and I got it specifically because I am a massive Doug Aldrich fan. I may be missing one of his Burning Rain albums, but I have almost all of Doug's catalog recorded across all sorts of projects. I was a huge fan of Doug Aldrich with Dio. I got to see him live with Dio at least twice, and I think 3 times. It was a little fuzzy there towards the end. But he was on several tours. Dio was on several tours with that iteration of the band. And of course, those of us that have followed the two bands for a while were kind of laughing when Doug left Dio and joined Whitesnake because, of course, Vivian had left Dio and joined Whitesnake back in the day. And you always think, isn't it weird that two bands that have such different outputs can use the same guy? But I think Doug was a fantastic fit. But I know in interviews at the time, Doug has said, I thought that David Coverdale wanted Sykes back. And I told him, well, that's not going to work for me because me and Sykes are the same kind of guitar player. And David Coverdale said, I don't want Sykes, I want you. Well, all you have to do is listen to the first second of this album because the first note is boom.
Yeah.
It's freaking John Sykes. This album could not be more 1987 in its execution. And I'm like, I don't know if that was Doug's idea, if it was David's idea. I know Doug has said he gave Reb no say in anything at this point. He said, yeah, I was pretty much a dick to that guy when the band started and kind of mellowed on him later as they went. But he is copying John Sykes so hard on this album. It's just absolutely crazy. But Doug is a very aggressive player. He had been with Dio. He brought that heavy metal aggression into Whitesnake with him, and he writes excellent riffs, and he plays his ass off on this album. It is very aggressive. The album's very aggressive, but it's very, very modern sounding. It's very wall of sound. This is during the compression wars. Everything is at the same volume, and it is right up front in your face. So that is a style of music that some people just can't get past, and I understand that. My favorite track is, actually, I think it's track 3. Can you hear the wind blow? Maybe it's the second track. Can you hear the wind blow? Which is just a fantastic riff. it's not quite Still of the Night, but it is just a killer riff. In fact, I don't think the lyrics are as good as the music, but it is just this powerful, fast, aggressive song, and I just love it. Now, on the flip side, I actually am going to also pick Summer Rain as my least favorite track because it sounds terrible. And, no shade on David Coverdale. The man already had a 35-year career when this came out. He had been around the block and he had done a lot of good things, but those were in his rearview mirror. And he needed to have enough honesty to say, I cannot sing this material and sound like David Coverdale from the 1970s. And his voice is thin and weak, and I literally get embarrassed listening to it. I'm like, oh, David, oh man, that's not good. We'll talk about this a little bit more on subsequent albums, but Summer Rain, it's not good.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Actually, when I interviewed Doug Aldridge, I was angling some questions about how it was with him and Reb, and seeing if there was any tension and how they sort of demarcated the duties. But he played it off as a true diplomat and gentleman, and didn't really go down that path. But I was angling. I love Good to Be Bad. I think this song absolutely swings. It's got groove. And it kind of reminds me of the groove that Deep Purple Mark III on Burn and Summer Stormbringer. Uriah Duffy and Chris Frazier, they were only there briefly, but the bottom end, they actually were a really good team, and they brought a lot of click and a lot of groove to this outfit. I think Coverdale's vocals just glide over the melody. It's husky, it's got rough edges, but it works. It really suits the melody. And Aldridge plays some mean rhythm, and the way he sort of intertwines with Red Beach is wonderful. I think this is a really sexy, slinky song. Out of all the songs off this album, this is not Four on the Floor. This really grooves. This is a real ass shaker. I love this song. My least favorite is A Fool in Love. The voice is a little fragile. It's a little shaky. And there's a duality in the song because it doesn't know whether it wants to be pop or it wants to go heavy. It has a heavy sort of verse, and then it goes into this poppy da-da-da-da-da-da, and then it goes heavy again. And it's kind of got a bit of a split personality. So to me, it doesn't quite work within the realms of the song. Summer Rain is actually one of my favorites because I think you guys are hearing it and go, oh, this is kind of David voice showing his age, lack of vocal chops, etc., etc. But I hear a different thing. I hear a Rod Stewart huskiness and fragility. He's being really fragile and exposing himself, and I think it really suits the vocals. So I guess this is we all hear what we hear, but to me, this is the other end of the scale for me. I hear somebody that's being emotionally giving and just pouring it out. And if the vocals are a little bit fragile, that's fine. I think it really suits the material. But there are other albums where I think the vocal frailness of David doesn't quite work with the material, and we'll get more into that later.
Now, don't you hate Rod Stewart, or is it just a couple of his singles that you hate?
I'm a huge Rod Stewart fan. Love him.
Okay.
I love that huskiness. I love the rasp. He's got the golden vocals. Are you a Rod Stewart fan, Tim?
I like some of his songs. I don't own any of his albums, but I like some of them, and I really don't like some others.
Yeah, but I guess it's that rasp. You like it or you don't, and that's where you sit on a vocal like this. But anyway, one more thing. Good to Be Bad was considered a success in coming out in 2007. It sold a lot of copies, and it was on Steamhammer or SPV, which is an independent label. Right. 800,000 copies worldwide. And this is in the day where CDs weren't selling anything. And I think that's quite an achievement. So this is considered a bit of a commercial success for Whitesnake.
He was doing something right, because that's the copy I found, like I said, at a local Walmart here in Eastern Canada. It was the SPV version. It's like, so he made the right deal as far as getting that thing distributed. I think it peaked at 23 on Billboard. Like it charted well, like considering how long he'd been away.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we go to 2011, Forevermore. So there, Tim's got it up.
Again, looking very similar to everything else in just different colors.
Yeah, so there was a bit of a change with bottom end. You had Michael Devon on bass coming in for Uriah Duffy, and also Brian Tichy on drums. So a different style of bottom end. It was very aggressive and very in your face. Tim, what do you think about this album, and favorite and least favorite song?
Well, just real quick, I just had a funny thought when Reed was talking about, guitarists that had like Coverdale and Dio in common. And I almost get this feeling it's like either of them could go on. Can you play Mistreated? Yes, you're in. Because they both play Mistreated at one time or another. So this, okay. You may notice I don't have this on vinyl. I really wish I'd have bought it when it first, because now it's super expensive on vinyl, but this is all I've got. This is where I'm noticing a huge problem that, and I've had this discussion. My very good friend Matt Phillips he wasn't into Whitesnake as early as I was, so I was much more familiar with the early stuff. I said, I am really getting fatigued with David Coverdale just cutting and pasting his damn lyrics, because there's a lot of that on here. He's taking older lyrics and putting them in parts of them into new songs. And it was getting to the point where you could almost predict what the next line was going to be after he sang a line if I'd never heard it before. I remember listening to this, I was driving, and the song I'm going to pick as my least favorite was just the one that just bothered me the most for that. There's two contenders for worst song. I'm actually going to go, disregarding what I said about Straight for the Heart, I'm going to go with probably the most straight up poppiest song on this album as my favorite, and that's I Need You, Shine a Light, because I think it's one of the few songs on this album that has a notable hook, because this is the problem I have with a lot of this latter-day Whitesnake stuff. It's exquisitely well produced. It's immaculately played, always very good musicians. But there aren't any hooks. There aren't the hooks that Sykes and Vandenberg would write with Coverdale. And there's, like I said, there's so much of the recycling of his lyrics. There's a song on here called Love and Treat Me Right. That's from Hit and Run years ago, and that's a better song. But the song that I'm going to go with as my least favorite is the second track, All Out of Luck. Now, you may listen to this song, go, what's wrong with this song? It is so predictable. I'm listening to it. All out of luck. I said, I bet he's going to say clean out of time. And he does. And then he sings it again like it's some great statement. The cutting and pasting of lyrics bothers me, and it's all over this album. I do not like this album. To me, this is by far the worst of the latter-day Whitesnake albums. So I Need You, Shine a Light. That's my favorite. And yeah, All Out of Luck is my least favorite. And, it's almost exclusively talking about the lyrics on here. Like, he's got absolutely nothing new to say. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, look, well said, Tim. And look, Tim and I have done quite a few Whitesnake shows. And when I started this channel, I reached out to Tim because we were part of the Contrarians. We did our favorite Whitesnake songs. Yeah. And straight off identified, we were having the discussion about David being perceived as a weak lyricist. And I said, look, you look at the lyrics to Walking in the Shadow of the Blues. It's simple, it's heartfelt. He's telling a story. And, there might be some cliches, but he's putting it in a way that matches the material and it makes it fresh. He has the ability. There are, yes, around that Ready and Willing era and that Come and Get It era where he does have the ability to pull out of the bag some lyrics that, instead of being cliched, tell us about him. You know what I mean? But I think
he could sell it. He could sell it with his voice.
But to me, I think that, these albums are very, they're done on the seat of your pants. They're kind of the economics, and maybe the lyrics are the last consideration at the end of it. All right, Reed,
All right.
what's your picks?
Well, so I actually love this album. And it's because, very specifically, to tie in with what both of you guys just talked about, I do think that Coverdale's a terrible lyricist. I've never liked his lyrics. I never pay any attention to what he's saying, only how he says it. So for that reason, his recycled lyrics don't bother me, because I never liked his lyrics in the first place. But I think that Forevermore is actually a step back on the aggression scale from Good to Be Bad. Good to Be Bad is a much more slam and in-your-face album. Forevermore dials it back. And again, maybe not to like classic Whitesnake levels, but to at least like Slide It In levels compared to 1987. So plus, I think that there's a little bit more camaraderie at this point between Doug and Reb. And, you know, again, Doug's a fantastic guy. I've never met him, but he comes off so nice in all the interviews. And I remember him saying, yeah, I let up a little bit. And Reb Beach said in interviews, yeah, I pursued Whitesnake to join that band when I found out he was looking for a guitarist, because there are only so many bands out there that a guitarist like me can play. And if you look at these two guys, you know, Doug Aldrich is Jimmy Page mixed with Eddie Van Halen, and then Reb Beach is Ritchie Blackmore mixed with Eddie Van Halen. So you really get kind of both sides of Whitesnake, less blues, more flash. But I think the songs are they're not as heavily riffy as they are on Good to Be Bad. The production is not quite as aggressive. But there's a massive exception to that, because this is the album where we start using production tricks to make up for David's voice. On Good to Be Bad, I think you get much more actual just DC vocal. On this one, you get more backup singing, you get more keyboards playing the same notes, which is that's one of the oldest tricks. Don Dokken did that all the time in the 80s. When he gets up at his register, he's playing, you know, they're playing keyboard notes under the high. You get a lot of, and the guitars are pushed up in the mix. I actually like the mix on this album better than Good to Be Bad. It's not red lined. Everything's not at the same volume. So, but the guitars are up and his voice is back. So they're doing everything they can to support David Coverdale's voice. Now, I think that was a good policy, because his voice, again, no shame, man. We all get older, and that guy is a rock and roll warrior. He has been through the ringer. But you also have to be honest. Now, that said, my favorite track is the title track. And again, I always feel like picking the title track's a cop-out, but I love this song, Forevermore. It's the last song on the CD, and it's a fantastic ballad. And it's fantastic because Dave is not screeching. He's not up here. He's using his chest voice. He's singing in a more intimate type of performance. And the song really, it supports that. And you move in from a ballad, not even a power ballad, just a straight up ballad for about half of the song. And then we mix in that Led Zeppelin grandiosity for the last half of the song. I think it works beautifully. I think it's one of the best ballad style arrangements that Coverdale ever did. And I think the band absolutely nails it. Now, for my least favorite, well, we're getting right back to the exact same problems we had on the last album, which is when David is a little too naked, when he's left too vulnerable, it's too obvious. And my least favorite is Fare Thee Well. Now, I give him props for not putting it as the last track on the album. I don't know who sequenced the album, but going out with Forevermore as the last track leaves you with a much better impression than going out with Fare Thee Well would have been. Plus, it's such an obvious idea, right? To have the last track be Fare Thee Well. But I think he just doesn't sound good. Because they are using more production tricks, it's not as bad as Summer Rain in terms of the sound of his voice. But David does not sound good in that style anymore. And the song is just average. It's so average, it doesn't make up for the lack in other areas. and it just comes off as it's unsatisfying to me on every level.
Thanks, Reed. Thanks. I agree. I think Forevermore is my favorite track on the album. To me, this is a song where he's looking at the past. He's reminiscing. There's a lot of gravity. There's a lot of emotion. He sings with sincerity. There's grandeur. And he's doing those Egypto chords. There's a little bit of Zeppelin. There's a little bit of the epicness of some of those like a Judgment Day type song. I think this crystallizes Whitesnake or late Whitesnake at their very best in this song. And I think it's a mighty fine closing track to the album. My least favorite is Dogs in the Street. We are all like dogs in the street. Well, Tim, I don't know if he, this is just probably almost, it's rock bottom. It's up there with Kittens Got Claws. It's just very uninspired. And the riff sounds like Sweet Lady Luck. It's like he's regurgitated
exactly. That's right. I never noticed that. I knew it sounded like something, but that's what it is. Yeah.
So we go to 2015 with the Purple album. So there you go. Tim's got it up. So David had made an overture to Ritchie Blackmore to perhaps put a project together. There's some conjecture. I don't think he actually spoke to Ritchie, but he was getting messages through the castle somehow. Carrier pigeon, we don't know. And there was, John was up for it before he passed away. Glenn Hughes, maybe it was going to be a little mini Mark III revival. John Lord passed away, and then all bets were off. Out of this, David thought maybe we could do something in respect of the Deep Purple catalogue. Here we have it, Whitesnake, the Purple album, which taps into Mark III, Deep Purple, Burn, Stormbringer, and Mark IV, Come Taste the Band. So this came out in 2015. And look, Tim, what are your favourite songs, least favourite songs, and your first impressions of hearing this album?
I remember that. I remember being very excited when I first found out about this because, Deep Purple as a name, like a lot of people know the name Deep Purple, but they don't know, like especially over here in North America, they don't. The songs that they think of from Deep Purple are not the Coverdale era songs. They think of Smoke on the Water and Highway Star and even Hush. So they don't think of the Coverdale era, and I think there's a disconnect. People don't realize that, hey, the guy that's the singer in Whitesnake was also in Deep Purple. And also I think that in a lot of cases, I think that there were songs on there that these versions are not going to replace the original versions, but I like how they brought them forward into the modern day. So yeah, I remember first getting this, and I listened to this all the time. And I was not, at the time, I only had Burn. I didn't have Stormbringer or Come Taste the Band. I immediately got them after hearing this album because I wanted to hear the original versions. So I like them all. I like the originals and I like the covers. But from the beginning, from the start of hearing the Purple album, oddly enough, my absolute favorite song on here is, I think, one of the most transformed songs. And it's actually one of what they call the bonus tracks. It's Coming Home. I love what they did with this song. They turned it into this twin lead Thin Lizzy type of song at the beginning. I just love it. It's melodic. The background vocals are fantastic. And then when I heard the Come Taste the Band version, I was like, wow, this is, because you didn't have Glenn. You didn't have Glenn on those high backing vocals. You had Tommy. So that's why it's just coming home. And I'm like, oh, like that. It took me a long time to get used to it. Now I love it. But so Coming Home is my absolute favorite. And if I had to pick a least favorite, because I really do enjoy this album, I'm going to go with Lay Down, Stay Down, only because it's not a Deep Purple song that I care too much for either. I just, something about it doesn't quite work for me. So I don't really particularly gravitate towards either version. But I'm being nitpicky. But yeah, Coming Home by far my favorite, and Lay Down, Stay Down my least favorite.
Thanks, Tim. Reed.
Okay. Well, I had a feeling that this would be some of our most interesting discussion, because between the three of us, we have three extremely different opinions on the original material. I do not like Mark III Deep Purple. And I have no use at all for Come Taste the Band. It's my second least favorite Deep Purple album. I think Stormbringer is boring as hell. And I think that Burn is okay, but no better than okay. Has some great songs. Burn's a fantastic song. Stormbringer's a fantastic song. But those albums I don't care for. We've had a lot of changes in the band. Again, Doug is gone. And now we bring in Joel Hoekstra, who Joel was another guy who he was playing in a Las Vegas show, and clearly he has lots of chops. He had a band, Joel Hoekstra's 13, but he's become kind of a journeyman. He was in Whitesnake. He's in Accept now.
Yeah,
Accept is a
and he's also played
band.
it, and he's also played with Cher.
Yeah,
and he was a Night Ranger.
And he played in the Broadway musical Rock of Ages. He was in the
TSO, Trans-Siberian Orchestra. Yeah,
absolutely.
So,
journeyman.
He gets around, and the guy can play. He absolutely can play. But I don't like him compositionally nearly as well as I like Doug. And by this point, after Doug leaves, Reb Beach kind of takes over as the musical director, and then they bring in Joel as the second guitar player. But you still have two guys that are functionally very modern, very shreddy guitar players. So I know guitar players always hate that. Oh, there's so much more to me than that. I'm like, is there? I said I shouldn't throw stones. The guy play rings around me and send me crying home. But when they said they were doing a Deep Purple album, I thought maybe this will be something that I'll enjoy. Because, well, no, I'll just say right off the bat, I hate this album. And I have no favorite song on it, and I have no least favorite song on it, because I hate every track for a different reason. The songs that I liked in Mark III, Mark IV Deep Purple, I hate the new versions. And the songs that I didn't like, Mark III, Mark IV versions, or Mark III, Mark IV Deep Purple, I don't think that the new versions add anything. They're very modern, which is fine. You know what? Some people listen to those old tracks and go, oh, they sound weak, which is true. They're not, compressed to the red line. The levels of everything is down. They're much more literally dynamic, because the levels of the volume go up and down as you listen to the song. But they were very much of the time. The Purple Album's very much of its time. But they've ramped up the production tricks with David Coverdale's voice even another notch from where it was on Forevermore. So this is really the point on Forever. Like I said, Good to Be Bad had some cracks. Forevermore, they're papering over the cracks. And by the time we get to the Purple Album, I'm like, it's over. The man, he can't do it like he used to do, which is fine, except that he keeps trying. So I don't like the vocals. I don't like the production, and I never liked most of the songs. So that's just an album. I was like, okay, I'll buy it, and I got it, and I listened to it one time, put it back on the shelf, never listened to it again until preparing for this show, and I listened to it and went, oh, I still hate this. So I'm not picking a favorite song, and every song on it is my least favorite.
Thanks, Reed. Well, where do I begin? This is the worst Whitesnake album, in my opinion. I think I love Mark III, I love Mark IV, and those albums were very much of their time. And you've got to realize that in the composition, the arrangements, the performances, there's subtleties that were very much within the 70s. There was a single guitarist. You had John Lord, you had a Glenn Hughes on bass, you had Pacey on drums, and David Coverdale. There was a certain chemistry, a certain alchemy. And the thing, I think the biggest crime, and maybe that's a very strong word, that this lineup of Whitesnake does is they don't respect the material. It's bludgeoned. There is no light and shade. Now, I was thinking, like, it's fine and Jim Dandy to go to look back at your past. And I think all the intentions of this album were very honourable. But you know, something like Led Zeppelin, Jimmy Page and Robert Plant, when they did, what was that album? No Quarter, and
No Quarter.
Yeah, they did interpretations. Why couldn't Whitesnake do that? Why couldn't DC do a reinterpretation? To me, he's bludgeoning the material, and it's very much through the prism of hair metal. And there's a lot of papering of the vocals, because you listen to the vocals all the way through, and it's double track. Everybody's singing, but they're covering up the failings of David's voice, because his voice is weathering through age, and he's not the vocalist that he once was. There's no light and shade. There's no space for the instruments to breathe. And that's what Mark III, Mark IV was all about. Now, Mark IV was a drug album. And, you know, you had Tommy Bolin and Glenn Hughes. They were at the peak of their drug usage. And it was a miracle they got music out. And it was really kind of weird circumstances that they were able to create art and create music. It's very hard to replicate that sort of sound, that sort of looseness, and put it through something that's just so rigid and so bombastic. And there's just no, it just kind of, the way that this band is performing, it just suffocates the material. There's no air between the notes. There's just so much wrong with this album. It's just one volume all the way through. I think this is the most misguided album in Whitesnake's catalogue. The intentions were there, but what has come out is completely something different. I agree with you about Joel Reed. I'm not a Joel fan. I think that he doesn't respect the material. He's a shredder. Tommy Aldridge is not right for the material because, you know, Pacey, you know, Ian Pace in Mark III and Mark IV had groove, had swing all the way through. Tommy Aldridge is just bludgeoning the material. It's flat. It's like a flat bat all the way through. I could go on. There's just so much wrong with this album. So like you, Reed, Lou Reed, like you, Reed, I'm abstaining. I can't pick a good song or a bad song. I've listened to this album all the way through, but I come out of it and I have to shake my head. Any other thoughts?
No, not for me.
Yeah, it's just, that's the great thing of doing these shows. You know, it's the great thing about it. Yeah, I like it. I like it a lot. And for all the, and I agree with all the points. You're right. Everything's redlined. I don't know. I still like it.
Yeah, and we love you, Tim. We love, and that's the
and there's a
wonderful thing
lot
about it.
Yeah, and you're right. They are covering up a multitude of you know, with Coverdale, and even when I saw them live, it's like everybody was singing. It's like, that's your gig, dude. You know, but you know, it's just, it's an interesting thing. It's an interesting thing to watch with some of these older singers, how they deal with the advancing years.
Yeah, absolutely. Alrighty. After that, we'll just go to the final album, which was Flesh and Blood. So it's basically the same lineup of the Purple album in 2019. Tim, favorite track, least favorite track?
So once again, we're really going very original with the, like, is this the Purple album? Is it the Purple tour? You know, which one is this? I actually really liked this album, and I was all ready to not like it because this is after I'd seen Whitesnake in concert. I was glad to see Whitesnake in concert, but I'm like, what is this going to sound like? But what I think Coverdale did that was smart on here was sing a lot of the verses in his lower register.
Right. And
the song that I like the best on here, where he does that, is Heart of Stone. I really like this one. This is like a classic, you know, David Coverdale Stung by Love, walking the streets at midnight looking for a little hot stuff. Oh, wait a minute, that's an old song. But no, I like Heart of Stone quite a bit. I mean, and it's all relative. Put it next to Slide It In or Saints and Sinners. No, this wouldn't even be it. But relatively speaking, for 2019 Whitesnake, I thought that was a pretty good song. Honestly, my least favorite on here was probably the song that they picked for a single, which was "Shut Up and Kiss Me." I just think that's another kitten's got claws. Like it's just beneath Mr. Coverdale. I'm going to say, like, especially the way that he's, it doesn't, when he's just, I'm so screwed. That doesn't sound right to me with Coverdale singing those lyrics. There's more of the lyrical rehashing on here, but I don't think it's as bad as Nevermore. But yeah, Heart of Stone's my favorite. Shut Up and Kiss Me is my least favorite.
Thanks, Tim. Reed.
Yeah. So I actually don't mind this album. I don't think it's fantastic, but it is very much a 1986, 1987 hair metal revival album. I think, Peter, you were exactly right about that. You get Joel and Reb together, and they're hair metal guitarists. Now, those guys are my age or a little bit older, probably, all of our age. I think we're a couple of years older than Tim. But that's the type of music that those guys excel at. And the thing is, of course, even on 1987, which everybody calls like Whitesnake the hair metal years, they weren't really, if you listen to Rat, if you listen to Poison, if you listen to Cinderella, they don't sound like Whitesnake. Whitesnake still had a lot more Britishness in them than American hair metal. Well, all of that's gone on this album. This could just be a straight up, you could have slapped Cinderella, have Tom Kiefer sing the songs and no one would know the difference, right? This is a straight up hair metal album. And that is okay. I don't hate that music. I grew up with that music. It's not my favorite, but I don't hate it. That said, there are some songs I really, really like on this album. And I kind of went back and forth on picking what I think is the best track, but I eventually went with Always and Forever because it's something new for Whitesnake. It's a Thin Lizzy pastiche. Listen to the twin leads at the start of that song. It could not be more Thin Lizzy. So
I never thought of that.
And that's the difference. Doug leaves the band and you bring in Joel, and instead of going Zeppelin, they went Thin Lizzy. And I'm okay with that because it's something different. Now, the song is not outstanding. It doesn't have the best riff on the album. It doesn't have the best vocal, but it's the most original, ironically, by it being a different band. But still, fun. It's a fun song. I enjoy it. I love Thin Lizzy. So I was like, hey, Thin Lizzy, that's awesome. My least favorite, we're going back to the old theme. It's when he tries to do the ballads, and that's When I Think of You. And he's one step beyond where he was doing the ballads in Forevermore. Now he's pitchy in addition to sounding weak. And I can't listen to it.
You're not a ballad man, are you, Reed?
I don't mind ballads for people who can sing them.
Yeah, but you put shade on Is This Love. I remember that from the epic show that we did. You said that was one of the worst songs on the album. That was my bloody wedding song, mate. Oh, well, maybe we should do a show with Reed and say ballads that I actually like. That'd be a good show. Yeah.
They exist.
They do.
Just not in hard rock.
I think this is an okay album, but it's probably not the way that I would like Whitesnake to finish. But it does look like it's the way Whitesnake may finish because it's really up in the air whether David will record again. He had an illness on the last tour. The tour, it was like the farewell tour, got sort of cut short. I think people were literally dropping like flies with COVID and wasn't able to complete it. And it's been in hiatus ever since. So he's doing a lot of project-y type things out of Lake Tahoe, but whether there's going to be another new Whitesnake studio album, who knows? But we've got to just run with this. So I think it's an okay album. I think that there are some good songs, and then there's a lot of filler and not so good. Get Up is probably my favorite song. It kind of swings, has groove. I like the later Whitesnake when they have groove and swing. That's what I like. And it's a miracle that this has swing because you've got Tommy on the drums. So he's really going against his grain. It's got that gang chorus and a descending melody. To me, it's got a bit of a boogie shuffle. It's like souped up ZZ Top meets Van Halen. So I think for what it's worth, it's a decent song, and I like it a lot. Oh, Shut Up and Kiss Me is just, it's so far away from Fool for Your Loving and Don't Break My Heart Again. It's like a different band, isn't it? It's like, hundreds of years ago. Look, there's a lot of effort put into this song on a very flimsy lyric. It's bubblegum, it's poppy, and what about that falsetto that he does at the end? I kind of cringe.
Yeah, it's it's like I said, it's fascinating, and you almost want to listen to hear what's he going to do. Like, what's he going to do when he gets to the end? Because you usually expect the big crescendo at the end of it. But yeah, I don't know about the only person I can think of. I'm not even going to bring up Vince Neil because he never could sing that well. But the only other singer I can think of that had such a degradation of their vocal cords is Paul Stanley. I mean, they owe us nothing, right? What they've recorded is just classic. It's funny you mentioned Get Up because when I first heard that song, and I still think of it, that reminds me of the song Feeling Hot from the Coverdale Page album.
Yes, I agree with you. Look, I think that David, I would have loved him to collaborate with Bernie Marsden when Bernie was alive, because Bernie was doing these tasty little blues albums, playing to his kind of niche audience. But I would have loved David just to, rein the vocal range, channel it into something that's a little bit more bluesy and go back to that early era. But, I think because 1987 is the cash cow, and if you're in this band and you're in this project or you're a producer, you may point David, hey, let's go back to Ready and Willing. He'll always say, hey, but look at the numbers, 25 million albums.
Yeah.
And that's always going to dictate that what David's going to do. It's always going to go back to 1987. So if he ever does another album, and whatever vocals that are left, maybe he can do it in the realms of something bluesy, acoustic, and, maybe something that has the spirit of those first couple of DC albums, the solo albums, because I was mighty impressed with the reissues and the remastering. It sounds wonderful. I know, Reed, that you like the DC solo albums, you were telling me.
I do. They're much mellower than the Whitesnake material. They're much more soul inflected than the blues inflected material that he does with Whitesnake. I have to admit, though, I did not listen to them back in the day. So getting the box set is the first time I listened to them. And I listened to the original version and then one's a remixed version and one's a remastered version. I always get those mixed up because they're such similar terms. And there's not a world of difference between those. I was like, man, I don't know if I owned the first one and bought the new one, I'd be kind of pissed that it was so similar. But they're good albums. And if you're in a mellower mood, I would much rather listen to those than, well, actually I say that, but I love Restless Heart. Restless Heart's probably the album I would pick if I wanted a mellower David Coverdale album.
And Tim, what would you like to see DC do?
It's a shame we lost Bernie. We're losing so many of those guys. But yeah, something else like Starkers in Tokyo, but with original material, something like that. Just maybe Adrian, maybe get Adrian back for an album's worth. They don't need to be in the same room anymore to do it. But if he's going to do anything new, then yeah, I don't think. I mean, we're 6 years removed now from Flesh and Blood. Even I don't know how much more they can unless they get AI to sing his parts, I don't know how much more they can do with his voice if he tries to do anything higher. I mean, it's a little bit like Don Dokken. All Don can do is just intone now. So,
Yeah.
but like I said, he doesn't owe us anything. But yeah, you'd almost prefer, okay, we're happy with what we've got from you. It's funny, those first two solo albums, I never heard those until 88 when 88 when I found a cassette that had both of them on it. It would come out. One album was on one side, one was on the other. And I remember it was a little confused because 4 of the songs on North Winds were on Snakebite. I'm like, well, wait a minute, those are Whitesnakes.
Right.
It's a little confusing, but it's different. But it's certainly with him and Moody, it certainly pointed the way towards like those early Whitesnake albums.
Yeah, absolutely.
Coverdale used to talk about remixing Coverdale Page, and he had this. It's never going to happen. It was just, pipe dream. But he said, I want to do a remix where I remix it and Jimmy remixes it, and we'll put out, a double album that has both remixes. And then he found out, unlike every other recording artist in existence, Jimmy Page doesn't have recording technology at his house. He's got no home studio. He's got any ability to do that.
Of all people, you'd think that he would have had that.
Yes, but he does
how
not
many
have a home
times
studio.
Yeah, considering how many times has he put the Zeppelin albums out?
Yeah,
that's crazy.
So, and that was during the COVID lockdown. So I would be shocked at this point if we get anything other. I mean, what else can he do? He doesn't own the early Whitesnake stuff.
No, so all you can do is slide it in, or slide it in onwards.
Well, I know it might be like the Holy Grail, but I really think that he should fight tooth and nail. Someone finds a way, a path to get access to those master tapes of those original Whitesnake albums, because Trouble, that needs to be sonically remastered, because the production is, average.
If Trouble sounded like Ready and Willing,
yes, someone's got to find a way to get those tapes, but maybe they don't exist. Who knows? Yeah. All he says were they are in the possession of my ex-manager, who I think's passed away. Who knows? But I think that's the key. That would be just so wonderful.
The odd thing is that up here in Canada, there's a company called Unidisc, and they somehow got the rights to any material that was on Mirage Records. So it's relatively easy even now to get vinyl or even CD reissues of Ready and Willing, Live in the Heart of the City, or Come and Get It. I'm always shocked when I see those albums at all now new, but you can get them up here because Unidisc owns the Mirage stuff. It's just kind of an odd thing.
Yeah, that's the path. And also another thing is apparently there's a lot of film footage of the classic era band, the Hammersmith Odeon. Apparently there was a film crew that, the Live in the Heart of the City, there was a film crew filming.
Oh, I would love to have that on Blu-ray. That's one of my favorite live albums of all time. I'd love to see it. Love to see that album cover come to life.
So there's a lot of a treasure trove out somewhere. Anyway, here we are, 3 Whitesnake Tragics, doing it again. Tim Derling, a pleasure to have you on the show. Reed Little. Folks, this is just opinions. We are passionate Whitesnake fans, and we all have differing opinions. But, hey, it makes the world interesting if we all like the same stuff. Be a bit dull and boring. So, Tim, wonderful to have you on the show. Reed Little, tell us, folks, what your favourite albums of this era, your favourite songs, your least favourite songs. We love reading your comments. Please like and subscribe to Rock Daydream Nation. I'll put all the links for Tim's channel and Reed from the Contrarians. But one thing's for sure, you'll see the 3 of us doing some more shows in Rock Daydream Nation in 2025. Good night and cheers. All the best.